Hello people of the internet, welcome to Paint to Life, the YouTube channel where we take tiny plastic miniatures, throw some acrylic paint on them, and breathe life into them through storytelling so that you might learn something new on the subject, or perhaps find a new creature for use in your own campaign. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you're a returning visitor, I appreciate it. Please like and subscribe if you like the content, and watch right through to the end of the video to help support the channel. I'm Atank, let's get painting. This week's video takes us far from the harsh, cold tundra where Glacius the White resides. If you missed him speaking Draconic last week, you can find last week's episode there. Have you ever been walking through a forest and suddenly had this sneaking suspicion that something was watching you? Or maybe at nighttime you hear something moving large between the trees, but you aren't able to identify it? It's possible that these occurrences you might have been face to face with a Treant without even knowing it. Mainly a docile race, Treants typically keep to themselves and tend to the forest. Make no mistake though, they're very protective of said forest and have been known to take up retribution for anyone harming it. They're effectively the physical embodiment of nature in the forest. Now Treants don't reproduce per se. They don't necessarily have males and females for all that. But what happens is nature selects a tree for awakening. And then what happens is, over years, a face will start to grow into the wood, the trunk will split into two for legs, and big branches will make their way down to turn into arms. Now, once awakened, they take the pulse of the forest, the eyes, ears, and smells from all the things that live there, the animals, the plants. The Treant can sense all of that, so they have a very good understanding of what's going on in the world around them. Now, a lot of the time you'll find these guys just hanging out in tree form, absolutely indistinguishable from a regular tree. Now, Treants have a positive relationship with elves for sharing the forested environment, and elves, realizing the power of Treants, keep them happy and protected and use them to help hide certain things that the world would probably be best forgetting about. Things like ruins or sources of evil, etc., etc. Spooky things. A Treant can also instantly magically animate some trees around it to serve as companions in battle and help itself out. And super old ancient Treants can even copy some of their sentience into these animated trees. Through the ages, many Treants have stood happy in their existence in their habitat, happily soaking up the sun and occasionally helping out small or lost creatures or helpless creatures of the forest. Now, though they may have sat peacefully to the point of laziness for long periods of time, when provoked, they explode with a fiery vigor. Many a greedy logging camp have been wiped out at the stumps and branches of a vengeful Treant for taking a little too much from the forest. Now, if you're playing in a campaign with a Treant, that's great. These things are exposition machines, and your DM wants to use it as such. Just pick up your garbage, leave a bucket of water beside the campfire, and say a little prayer to whichever religious nature deity you want before you hunt, and you'll be good. And then, once you start to talk to the thing, make sure you ask it where you can find some fat loot in exchange for doing some of the nature's foresty biddings. But who is our Treant? In this episode of Paint to Life, I'm going to tell you about the great ancient Treant named Arbogast. In the heart of the Forgotten Realms is a massive forest called Cormanthur, which is only a remnant of the ancient elven empire named Cormanthir. Now, many evils have assailed Cormanthur over thousands of years, from demonic invasion attempts at ancient spots of power to encroaching human and orc communities just continually eating away at the boundaries of the forest. But one large section of the forest remains strong and prosperous for all elves and nature in general. Whether it be demons, orcs, humans, monsters, it didn't matter. Arbogast was in complete control of his domain, And well, it kind of gets boring when you have no conflict, and he was content, yet old, and lived peacefully in nature. So when he was called to meet with 3 elves and a human priest, to say that he was a little bit curious would be an understatement even for a Treant. Now the party consisted of 2 married elves, Nim, a ranger, Shura, a fighter, and their friend, an elven druid named Shandalar. And they were also in the accompaniment of a human priest of Sylvanas named Quarian. So this party presented themselves with all the appropriate respect that you would offer such an ancient being as Arbogast, and they pleaded with him to hear them out. Quarian spoke of a plague that was ravishing the lands that caused humans to turn undead, animals to go feral, water to become toxic, and any trees that it touched and infected would crumble to dust. Now Quarian had a small sample of this plague with him in a vial, and when Arbogast sniffed it, instantly some of his leaves shriveled up dry and fell off, and he recoiled with such horror that his large hazel eyes trembled with fear, and immediately pledged himself to the party in any way that he could help them find the cure for this plague. He would. Now Quarian said, "I am close to a cure for this plague, but I require elements that are in this great enchanted forest." Now the first ingredient that Quarian was looking for were 2 petals from a black lotus flower, a flower that was enchanted and so rare, they say, that only 2 would bloom within a 25-kilometer radius of each other at any given time. Now Arbogast laughed, for whatever that sounds like, and motioned for the group to follow him. Despite being 25 feet tall, an immense creature, he moved quite agilely, and they struggled to keep up, but they did. And sure enough, within 2 hours, the party was standing over one of these magnificent black lotus flowers. Quarian gathered the petals, put them into his pouch. Then he sat down to meditate, to speak with Sylvanas to find out the next step of their quest. Once he was done, he had it, but he looked perplexed. Sylvanas had told him through a vision that he was looking for a 1,000-year-old baby. And that made no sense to anybody. Does it make any sense to you? Did I write myself into a corner here? Where are you going to get a 1,000-year-old baby? Luckily, Shandalar, the druid of the party, recognized it as wordplay, and that it must be referring to a seed. Arbogast, upon hearing this, closed his eyes and sought help from the forest and plants. Not long after, he again motioned for them to come, and he led them again through the forest to this underground warren. Nim and Sur led the party underground, where they routed a family of wereboars while the Great Old One waited outside. There, right where he said it would be, they dug into the compressed volcanic ash that made up the floor, and sure enough, they recovered an ancient oak seed. "Finally," said Quarian as he snatched it and put it into his pouch. Returning outside, he again sat to meditate to Sylvanas for their next step. When he was done meditating, Quarian stood up, turned to the group and said, "I know what the final ingredient is, but I don't know what the final ingredient is. I'm shown the lifeblood of the forest. I have no idea what that is." Arbogast got uncomfortable. He knew exactly what that was. In fact, it was one of the things he had vowed to protect with his life and let no harm come to. His thoughts went back to the smell of that plague vial that Quarian had, and decided that the risk was worth it. So one final time, he motioned to the group to follow him as he led them deeper into the forest. They came to a glade with 2 large trees that had grown wrapped around one another for eons. Arbogast lifted his hands, and the 2 trees unwrapped from one another and stepped aside, revealing a shrine from which a bubbling pool of water, about 4 feet in diameter, was pouring out of. The elves looked at this and immediately knelt down, for they knew it as what it was. This was a natural spring, but it was radiating magical energy, as there must be some kind of magical ley line here. This indeed was a sacred place. The lifeblood of the forest indeed. Quarian took the ingredients out of his bag and began to mix them. When he was finished, he stood in front of the lifeblood of the forest and said, My friends, this is it. But this is not the final ingredient in the cure, no. This is the distribution system of the plague. You have been spectacular servants for my goddess. May she grant you a long and painful death. Talona, goddess of pestilence and filth, accept me, your humble servant. And he jumped into the pool, carrying the vial. There was an explosion of green and yellow goo which splashed on the elves, who were shocked. They screamed as their skin erupted into boils from the instantaneous plague, and they fell down on the ground in agony. Arbogast stood in shocked disbelief, then quickly stepped forward and plunged his roots deep into the ground and started to draw the poison from the ground like he would draw venom from a wound. He groaned in agony as every ounce of his strength sucked more and more of this pestilence from the ground and into his body. He looked up to the sky, and his hazel eyes clouded over into a murky, yellowy glaze. Now, Arborgast the Corrupted raised his limbs and commanded his lieutenants to rise, Nim, Sura, and Chandelar. He commanded that they go collect kegs so that they might fill this plague and transport it across the forest and beyond and spread the disease across the world. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Cormanthor, the great ant regains consciousness inside of an ash tree this time. Arbogast, looking at his new body, immediately raises as many trees as he can muster to go and find this pollution and stop it. There's some. So they drive their roots into the ground and start to absorb it to cleanse the land. However, as soon as they've reached their capacity, they become corrupted and lash out and attack everything nearby, friend, foe, animal, crazy-like. Once the corrupted treants are destroyed, Arbogast again awakens new trees, and they go to repeat the process all over again. There is a cycle of life in nature that acts as a great balance, and nowhere is this more true than the secret, quarantined section of the Cormanthor Forest now known as the Glow Wood, where the struggle against Arborgast the Defiler continues to this very day. So that's it for this episode of Paint to Life. I hope you enjoyed it. So let me know what you thought of Arborgast the Defiler in the comments below. Here he is in all his Toxic Avenger-like quality for the shelf. If you want to watch the painting video with my commentary, you can find it in the link here and in the description below. I also go over how I made those sick looking barrels in that commentary. Also, if you like this channel and want to help me grow, please like, subscribe, and share this video. It really helps, and I thank you for that. I've been answering all the emails and comments that I get, so if you have any for me or any requests, please send them my way. I love to read them. Now is also a great time to get into the miniature painting hobby. I know a lot of people have been doing it over the quarantine, so please check out your local gaming store. A lot of them are doing curbside pickup or local deliveries, and they have all kinds of stuff in stock, and they could really use our support now more than ever. So please go check them out and tell them Atank sent you. That's it for now. I will see you next week. Wash your hands, people. What's that, like the Wiggles? Didn't the Wiggles used to do that? Do you even know what the Wiggles are?